Right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Alban Debeaulieu. We're at Abbott Claim in Carlton. It's July 9th, 2020. Are we in Carlton? Did I say that right?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Abbott Claim in Carlton. It's July 9th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining us today, Alban. First question for you, most important question, why wine?
Why wine? Well, so I'm French. I grew up in France. And it happens that I really grew up fascinated by wine. It was one of the things that always attracted my attention growing up. And that has to do with my family, and my family don't own a winery or vineyards, don't have vineyard holdings in France. But my grandparents, uncles and cousins all lived in the Loire Valley and in the west of France. My maternal grandfather was a retired engineer, and I would spend summers growing up from, being a toddler to being 10, 12 or something. My parents would drop my sister and I off to the Loire Valley to my grandparents, and the summer were made of fishing, mushroom hunting, and cellar visits, vineyard visits. So we'd visit the local vigneron, the local wine producers, and my grandfather would buy wine. I mean, he was a retired engineer, so had a little bit of money aside, kind of a middle class but comfortable retirement. So he would just buy wine around. I remember in his little cellar in his garage underground there was a little bit of Burgundy as well, a little bit of Alsace wines. But yeah, I mean, if one of my earlier memories about wine is probably visiting cellars with him in the Loire, in Chinon. We'd do a lot in Chinon. We'd go to Vouvray. We'd make the trek a little bit west. But Chinon was really his backyard, and I just remember kind of the feelings and really the smells of a moist, cool underground barrel cellar, the smell of wine aging in barrels in cold and moist caves is a memory that I have, and I don't know if I can date it, but it's just been something I've always had with me. And smelling, not necessarily tasting or drinking wine very young, but at least definitely smelling wine and a lot with him, and even sometimes he would buy some wine in bulk, so we'd just come home and bottle it, and so we'd have a lot of shiners in his cellar of his favorite producers. He would buy, a little piece of a barrel, and then we'd bottle it and so on. So yeah, a lot of those kind of first-hand experiences when I was a kid, around vineyards, around wine producers, smelling wine, tasting wine, bottling wine. And then I kind of had a different angle on this thing as well from my paternal grandfather, who was a peasant in the west of France, closer to the Atlantic, who after coming back from the Second World War was a prison guard on the Ile de Ré, on a beautiful little island in the Atlantic. And then after that, when he retired, he came back home and he planted, he had a big garden and had a couple of hectares of mixed crops, and including some rows of vines. And so I would also, help him. I remember hedging when I was a kid. I remember the few barrels he had in his garage as well, and his little basket press and so on. And he'd make what he'd call the vin courant, which just can translate by common wine. Just vin courant, is just everyday wine, just wine that's around. And that's really I think was important in how I perceive wine, and especially since I've been coming here, I've been more and more aware of how the relationship people may have with wine, and I realize that mine is specific because of those early exposures to wine and kind of the way I was exposed to wine and how I saw it as a part. It was just a very simple relationship to wine, and definitely wine of value, because every time there was wine that was on the table with grandparents, parents, and so on, it was always kind of the center of the conversation. I always talked about where it came from and how you want to smell this, and what do you smell, when you taste it, what you taste, and so on. And here's the varietal, here's the region. But it was a very, it was very small and very, very simple, very kind of a commodity. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't luxury, it wasn't something to endlessly talk about and kind of conceptualize and intellectualize. It was just a very straightforward drink. So anyway, but because there was this interest, there was this extreme care into making wine, buying wine, tasting wine, enjoying wine. That's the reason why I kind of got fascinated with it, because just it seemed to be the thing that people really cared about, as much as the really good dish that you made and you really cared about and you're putting in front of your guests. And opening a bottle of wine, there was always a ceremony around it, even though it was simple wine. That really kind of got me interested and fascinated. So yeah. But I guess I didn't really finish your question, because why did I end up getting into wine? Weirdly enough, because it was such a commodity, because it was so simple, I never thought there was a career into wine and I was working to wine. Again, my family didn't own a vineyard, so I didn't have a vineyard to take over. So there was no writing on the wall or anything. There was no clear path. And I didn't think there was a path at all. I don't think there was a path for an outsider to get into the wine industry or the wine world. So I ended up studying agronomics in the south of France, in French Catalonia, in Perpignan, just 30 minutes north of the Spanish border. And there, in my second year, there was an enologist from Montpellier who came and gave us some viticultural classes, and we started working a small vineyard that was within the campus, that we had within the campus. And we made some wine, and we had an enologist come and tasting classes, enology classes, winemaking classes, a little basic viticulture and so on. And I just started, I ended up asking her, just what do you do? Like, you obviously don't own a vineyard, you don't produce wine for yourself, but you have knowledge and you have this enologist title or whatever that may be. How did you get there, and what can you do with that? And as soon as I realized that, there was just no going back for me. As soon as I realized that you could get a degree and get a job into wine production, I didn't realize it was possible, but as soon as I realized it was, next year I moved up to Burgundy to do the undergrad in viticulture and then the master's in winemaking. And so, there was no question anymore.
Tell me about once that light bulb kind of goes on for you, tell me about the formal education process and what you, as you set out, maybe what you saw your career in wine looking like.
Yeah. So the formal education parts, so again, I started as, I did years in agronomics, and there was a little viticulture. There was a different plant physiology, and there's a tiny bit of viticulture in there. But that allowed me to get, in the US, you talk about credits, even though it doesn't exist in the French system, but I definitely had equivalents. The 2 years I had done in agronomics were basically giving me the first 2 years I could have done in pure viticulture. And so I just had to do the last year of viticulture to get my undergrad in Burgundy. And then in the same institute, l'Institut Jules Guyot in Dijon, I just kicked in right away into the winemaking enology masters. So that's, it's about the formal education. Yeah, in Dijon it's interesting. It's a research institute with different undergrad and master's degrees. There's also, when you're in the heart of Burgundy, so with friends, on weekends or when we had free time, we also kind of go down to Beaune and to the villages and just taste around and make friends. So I'm happy it was not just a formal education. I made friends. One of my best friends has a winery one of the best friends I met in the masters has a winery in Mâcon. So we also made friends down there, and just kind of, able to conjugate the theory with the practical, with the how do you say the practical aspects. And then also in that undergrad and masters, you have to do internships and harvest in the middle, of course. So that's all good and important. How I saw my path after that, I had no idea. I was already happy enough to be doing wine. I mean, what I knew is that I wanted to make wine. I was actually surprised. I was very surprised, and I'm still not sure that there was probably half of my class who got into that masters of winemaking without, obviously not the intention the drive to make wine. And some of those people actually I know for a fact are not even not doing anything that has anything to do with wine at all. That's another discussion. That's criticizing the education system, which is a mess here and there and everywhere. It's difficult. But what was I going to say? For me though, and the friends and kind of the friends I made, there was no question that it was all going to be about making wine. I'm not from Burgundy. I just got to Burgundy because I wanted to, and I loved it from the get-go, and I still love it so much. But it's a tight knit of a place. So it's not like there's a job opening in Burgundy every other week. It doesn't happen. Like when someone is in a position of technical director or head winemaker in Burgundy, usually, it's when he retires. If you're on top of the already on their list, you get a call. But yeah, it's so I didn't really know. I just knew that I wanted to make wine and work harvests, and so it took me. But I knew that I wanted responsibilities really, really quickly. I knew that I've always been very critical of what I was being taught or how I was being told to do things. So, and then doing harvests, my first first hands-on experience, I was already starting to build my own ideas of how I would like to do things, and when things were not done how I thought I would have liked to see them done. With even my lack of experience in my youth, I thought that I want to do it by myself, and I want to be able to have a say in exactly how things are being done, and wine is being made, and grapes are being handled and treated, and so on. So I didn't have a clear path. I really just went with what was being put in front of me. I mean, I met my wife in Burgundy, who's American, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe try to do a harvest in the US. And actually, my friend Thomas at Lingua Franca, who was a few years older than I am, so he was finishing his studies in Dijon when I was starting. But he told me, if you want to go to, he had just come back, I think, from Gallo in Napa, in California, and I told him, next time I'm going to Oregon, and if you want to go to the US, that's where you should go, Pinot and Chard and so on. And at the same time, I also just did harvest for the Druins. So I met Veronique, he told me, want to come do harvest in Oregon for us? And so it's just I had just made my wife, who's American. So yeah, it worked out pretty well, and then just did a harvest here, and then I was going to do harvests in Australia, but that didn't happen because I got offered a job at White Rose next to the Druins in the Dundee Hills. So yeah, again, I've never really planned too much. Although I like to have a plan laid out in front of me, but I guess now. But at the time, I just let it happen, and it's still happening, I guess. So why not? Yeah.
Before we get to your kind of various stops in Oregon, I'm curious. You mentioned kind of from the start, making wine was your interest. What was it about the process or about learning about making wine that intrigued you so much, that kind of pulled you in right away?
Yeah, I mean, I loved the products, and for me, I grew up with a love of the products and what it did to people and what it could symbolize, and I really saw it as it's both an agricultural product. I mean, fundamentally, it is an agricultural product, and when you come down to it, that's what it only should be seen at. But then if you want to take a step further, it's also became a cultural product, right? It's as winemaking is as old as civilization, and it says something about where people live, how they live. It just really says about something about their values. So I've always loved the product. Now, and I thought that the only way for me to interact with wine was to make it. I didn't want to be a taster on the sidelines. I didn't want to be how do you say, un témoin, on the sidelines, and I just really wanted to be. I thought for me there was just one process. There was just one thing to do in wine. Thinking about wine, writing about wine, tasting wine but just tasting wine, just kind of getting at the very end of the process was not interesting. And then so yeah, it had to be making wine, just because for me that was the only meaningful way for me to connect with the product that I had come to be so interested in. And yeah, there was just no. Yeah, I guess that's the only thing that made sense. That's it.
Tell me about your initial impressions of Oregon when you came here. So you came here to work at Domaine Drouhin?
Yeah, my very first impression. I was told it was, and I've been living in the Willamette Valley for 7 years now. But I was expecting the green, beautiful countryside that everyone described me. And my first drive down to the countryside was driving on the 99 from the airport to Dundee, which is basically a non-stop of malls and gas stations. So that was my very first impression, with a lot of big trucks. So that was my very first impression. It was a lot of asphalt, sidewalks, concrete buildings, and large trucks. That was my very first impression. Then I'm sure you probably want to talk more about the wine industry, or is it or the culture? Yeah, people amazingly welcoming, just very casual. There's just a casualness, if that's the proper word. I think casualness. There's a casualness about people, and here that is just wonderful. Yeah, I did 6 months of harvest with the Drouhins and the team at the winemaking team at DDO's, some good friends of mine, and Aaron, Veronique's assistant there, was amazing. There was also 2 other French guys with me at harvest, and there's more people than that, but just amazing people, making people at ease, and it's just a general thing, right? It's just people are very casual and they want to have fun and so on, and so I thought that was new, that was interesting. Just the way people were just so casual and so open and so welcoming. So that was great. What else? I'm trying to think back. What did I think?
Did the work surprise you in any way? Was there anything different about the way things were being done here?
Well, I mean, again, my first expression was working for the Drouhins, and after having worked for the Drouhins, so there was a common thread. And it wasn't also 100% Oregonian. It was also there's a chunk of French in there. And I love the Drouhins, the Drouhin family so much. I mean, Veronique and her parents, Françoise and Robert, are just the most wonderful people in the world. So it was easy. It felt, and there was other 2 French guys from Burgundy, and it was pretty easy to fit in. I guess when I really had to fit in, when I kind of faced not being at home anymore, was after harvest, when I had the harvest line lined up for Australia, but at the same time, because we liked it, and I realized that there was opportunities to maybe get some more serious work in Oregon. I had just met Jacques Lardière from Maison Louis Jadot. That was in 2013, and that's when they bought Resonance, and they were visiting. And I remember talking with them, and Veronique afterwards telling me, if you want to stick around, I know several people. There's Jacques here, and so she kind of put a seed in my brain, that in my mind, that there's things to do, and people could be interested in giving me some work maybe. So yeah, she wrote me a nice letter of recommendation that I started to send around with a resume, and I just did that between the end of the harvest at Domaine Drouhin and when I was supposed to take off for Australia. I wasn't planning on. I think at the time, if I remember well, I was just planning on maybe looking for something after coming back from Australia, a harvest that could turn into something serious. I'm not sure. But again, no big plans. I had just got a green card at the time, just because, if we, just in case. I mean, it's good to have it. Because my wife and I just didn't know where we were going to be living, US or France, no idea. But yeah, I ended up meeting the people at White Rose Estate up in the Dundee Hills, and they offered me a position of assistant winemaker, which I took and stayed there for a bit over 2 years. So I worked with Jesus Guillen for a bit more than 2 years in that little winery there, and that's when I started living in Oregon and meeting Oregon and the people and so on, and realizing the differences with France and so on, and the culture, and yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that, about your kind of first non-French winemaking experience.
Yeah, that was it. Well, from the winemaking part, I realized that, wine knowledge travels. Say winemaking knowledge, for example, technical knowledge. travels really well, right? We have the internet now. Now, what you make of it is really relies on who you are and how, right, your values, what is your culture. So to talk about wine specifically, how you interact with wine, how do you see wine, what is your perception of this whole process. And so I realized that there was just a completely different sensibility, for me at least. I mean, that was my first impression. There was also even ways to interpret the knowledge that was written black on white for me. But yeah, there was just ways of interpret knowledge that I guess I didn't. Yeah, I was struggling with a little bit. And then also the whole, just, it's called the wine business. Yeah, we don't. That's not how we call it in Europe in general. I mean, it's le monde du vin. It's the world of wine. It's the mondo vino. It's not the business. It's just the world of it. So it's just the people. But yeah, it's so that I think it does tell a lot. It says a lot about kind of how perception of, you know, why people how they start wineries, why they start them, how they approach this new business, this new process. And yeah, that was different. And then to that you add the whole wine less as an agricultural product, still as a cultural product, and more as a rare luxury product. And of course it exists in France, but it really started existing only in the 80s when the markets opened up to the US, when the US market opened up, and that's when those great wines the prices of those great wines went through the roof, and that's when people started collecting and speculating. So there's this difference in value and culture that really impacts how people interact with wine, how they make wine, how they grow vineyard, how they even plant vineyard, how they even think about planting a vineyard. Why, how, and same, winemaking, marketing, obviously a big thing. And also just talking about wine and how people write about wine, how they score wines, what scores mean, what exposure means. All of these things, I've just realized the importance of all of those things here. But again, my first interaction with wine was, I think, a bit more straightforward and simple. So
Did it change your approach at all? Did it make you less excited about it, more excited about it? Did it?
No. Oh no. I never doubted, and it never changed how I felt about wine and why I wanted to make wine, and why I love drinking wine and tasting wine and sharing wine. No, the only thing it just made me again just want to do it, have more say about how things are done and how a story is told and how wine is presented and enjoyed, and of course how vineyard is planted. Just even thinking about planting a vineyard, about making wine, about just all those things, there's different intentionality when you. Yeah, I just wanted to make those things happen for myself a little bit. So yeah, very fortunate to be given the opportunity to do it for myself.
I'll ask about that in just a second, but I'm curious first if you, in terms of winemaking style, obviously White Rose has a very well-known style that's different than many others. Tell me about what you kind of learned at DDO and at White Rose for your own personal kind of winemaking style and background.
So when I was finishing at DDO and Veronique planted the seed in me of maybe there could be opportunities in Oregon and looking for those, I started tasting and meeting people and kind of shortlisted places I was interested in, and White Rose was interesting to me because one of the very first ideas that I may have had about winemaking when I was in Burgundy is that for me just whole cluster, making wine whole cluster was the most normal way to make wine, the most straightforward way. And straightforward means a lot, is a big part of how I see making wine, is that it has to make sense on a very simple level. It has to be it can't be complicated. If it's complicated, it's because we've made it complicated. it's agriculture, it's fermentation, it should be, if I always saw it as a pretty honest, transparent agricultural and cultural product. And if you want it to be that, there should be as little human-induced complications and ego. That's another thing. Put into that mix. If you do that, I think you're losing the thread. You're missing something. So back to whole cluster. That was just one of the many things that was exemplifying that feeling, not that concept, but more of a feeling for me. Was that you harvest that cluster and you end up having to put it through a machine to remove the stalk, but putting it all together in the fermenter just works just as well. So why do you do that? Oh, because you want control on the style. Oh, why do you want to control the style? That's not, you're losing transparency, you're losing honesty in your process. So we destem quite a bit of fruit just, here. I hope I'm very thoughtful about whole cluster, just because you obviously have to understand exactly what those things lead to. But this kind of youthful, dogmatic vision of mine at the time really led me to be interested into white rose. And even that before, when I was in Burgundy, I knew that also early on I tend to love whole cluster wines anyway. So, but it has to be thoughtful. When I started here, for example, the first vintage I did not a single whole cluster, not a single whole bunch went to the fermenters, just because you have to know what you're working with before you go all crazy. You have to be thoughtful about it. And that has changed since, but it's about learning. It's about being careful and doing it well. But yeah, I got excited about White Rose because it was a small, very hands-on winery. It was a tiny place, and there was this whole cluster thing that always appealed to me at the time when I was younger. So yeah, still does. But, yeah.
So what happens next after White Rose?
After White Rose, the people at Chapter 24 and 00 Wines reached out, and that was in February or March 2016. And so Mark Tarloff at the time had started Chapter 24 in 2012, I believe, 2012. And the following year had started a label called 00, which I think got some press at the time, for sure. People were talking about. And Mikey Etzel was making those wines. Louis-Michel Ligier-Belair was working with them. And since those projects tend to be ever-changing, things changed. And it came to early 2016 where they didn't have a winemaker anymore to make the 00 wines. So they reached out to me, and I left White Rose after a little bit more than 2 years, and became the winemaker for 00 Wines. So I was asked to make some small production, expensive wine in amphoras. We were renting space at Coelho Winery at the time in Amity, which was a really wonderful place to work with. I gotta say, the Coelhos was just really great, and their winemaking there, Chris, was an amazing playground for me. I just could do whatever I wanted, and they really gave me room, and they were just really, really flexible and helpful, and it was amazing. And so I got to make. I worked for 00 in 2016, and at the same time, Mark Tarloff wanted to create a new label within Chapter 24 called Alit, which has still 9th of July 2020. Today still has a tasting room in Dundee, and again, those things are ever changing. I made those Elite wines in 2016 as well, while I was doing 00. So it was such an amazing year for me, because it was finally the first time I was given the keys to making wines to a project, and I got to make the wines of 000. I think at the time it was we made about 700 cases, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So the Pinot Noir was in amphoras and open top puncheons. I would take the top of a puncheon, the head of a puncheon, and just ferment in there. We'd be snipping berries one per one with little clippers and just filling amphoras. Oh yes, filling amphoras, filling puncheons, and just fermenting those delicately. Started the Chardonnay program there. Oh no, actually, I guess they had started making Chardonnay in 2015, but before that was only Pinot. So 2016 was the second Chardonnay vintage for 000. And at the same time, I was doing Alite, and Alite was about 7,000 cases of Pinot Noir exclusively. And that I was to make as custom crush. So I had a wine made at Northwest Wine Company, at Lingua Franca, first vintage at Lingua Franca in 2016, when they were still finishing to build and making wine. Finishing to build, they had occupancy, but it was still a breezy building. And at the third place was at Witness Tree, which Chapter 24 or Chapter 24 associated fund had just bought Witness Tree and the old winery there, where Heath, our vineyard manager, viticulturist, used to work before he was at Bethel Heights. And so I had wine made at Lingua Franca by Thomas, at Northwest Wine Co. by Anne and Brian and the team there, the wonderful team at Northwest. And at Witness Tree by Felipe Ramirez, who if you haven't interviewed, you should, who's one of the best, most thoughtful, smartest winemakers in the Valley, I think. And there's a lot of amazing people in Oregon, of all generations. And Felipe is in his early 40s and is brilliant. And so he was also making some wine for I was having some wine made there at Witness Tree for Alite. And so every day I would work at Coelho, make the wines, work the amphoras and the puncheons and so on, and then I would drive to Northwest, sit with those guys, taste, talk, and then drive to Lingua Franca, say, hey Thomas, taste, talk. Felipe, and usually at the end of the day with Felipe, and I would give him a hand to like empty a tank or something, and then I would go back to Coelho maybe and so on. And my wife we were living in McMinnville at the time, so my wife would drive to Coelho at 9 or 10 in the evening and help me do a little something until midnight. So it was fun. I was 25 years old. I was asked to make definitely some of the most expensive wine in Oregon as well, which was just a ridiculous undertaking. It had gotten all that press, and it was just, I loved it. I was so driven by the challenge and the fun. The team was so fun. Felipe is such a good friend of mine. Ryan Hannaford, the vineyard manager, such a good friend of mine. Just amazing drive. I enjoyed working for Mark Tarloff. I did. He really is. He pushes you and puts you out of your comfort zone. And I think being 25 and having done 2 years at White Rose, that's exactly what I needed. I really need to do to be challenged and then just to really work my ass off and just try to do my very best and try to impress and so on. So that's what I did so I guess if we're still moving forward with time, I arrive in February or March of the following year, 2017. And while I had absolutely no intention of leaving, because again, I was having great fun, I got an email out of the blue from Anthony Beck, who presented himself as the owner of a label called Angela Estates, which I had, I don't know if, I think I had mildly heard about, but there's just so many labels, so many brands in Oregon that it was just,
Tell me about it.
Something I may have heard of and I didn't really know much about, and nothing stuck really. Mm-hmm. And he was reaching out to me on recommendation of Véronique Drouin, and he was looking for a winemaker, and the wines have been made at Ken Wright's for the past 12 or 13 years, and he wants to build a winery, and he wants a winemaker to oversee the new version of this whole project, which has been a sleeper, and that's definitely been a sleeper. The brands, everything was everyone admits on cruise control. And it was time to take the next big step for him, and he reached out, and I remember because I got his email during a very busy week. Mark Terloff was here. Mark had flew from New York. He had brought Psalms with him. We were very busy just tasting and driving to a vineyard and to another vineyard, and I think we had Pedro Parra, who's still consulting with Rose and Arrow now with Felipe. Pedro was here, so we were doing soil pits and just driving from vineyards to vineyards and just talking the next big plans and so on, and all the amazing things we were going to be doing. And so I think I quickly told Anthony, I don't have time to answer your email. It was a thoughtful email he had sent me, and I told him honestly, I'd like to send you a response that honors how much thought and intention you've put in you reaching out to me, so I'll do that next week. And then I finally sat down and I did, and I really didn't want to leave, and what I knew of Angela Estate was didn't spark a burning desire in me to jump ships either. But I went and met him because I had to honor Véronique Drouin's recommendation. Véronique, I thank you very much, but I don't need your help. No, that's not, that there's no way. I mean, Véronique is, Véronique's guidance means a lot to me. So of course I was going to meet him. I was at least going to do that. And meeting him just changed it all. Anthony is of a rare breed. People so passionate and so genuine and so kind of like him, with such a serious long-term vision for thing. I found that so valuable, and it drew a pretty strong contrast with where I was at the time with 00, which was more in the moment. It was ever changing, and it wasn't more in the moment, and there was a lot of creative energy and so on, which is amazing, which is great and very appealing when you're young. And then meeting Anthony, I realized, there's that too. The Drouin family, multi-generational wine family, long-term outlook, take the time to do things well, work the vineyard, buy the lands, don't source fruit too much, just buy the land, work the land, then make wines, understand your vineyards. And when you have that down, maybe you build a winery. Mm-hmm. Just step by step investments. There's this more long-term multi-generational. And by multi-generational is the case for Anthony. His father started their winery in South Africa in 1987 called Graham Beck, which is a Méthode Champenoise sparkling wine only winery in the Cape of South Africa. And they then purchased a second winery called Steenberg in Constantia, which is within Cape Town, really. Mm-hmm. And that is the oldest running farm in South Africa. 1682 or 1684. 1682 or 1684. But so there's kind of this weight and this substantial intent that Anthony has, just that very thoughtful, methodical, long-term outlook that just really made me realize that that's why I love working for the Drouin so much, because it was the real people. They were wine people. They've always been wine people. It's more down to earth. It's more as people from they're Burgundy nobility, but at the same time it's wine. Mm-hmm. And they know what a wine is. They understand what wine is. They understand that it's slow, that it's painstaking, that you don't make money on year 1, year 2, year 3, or year 5. And it was just nice to see Anthony's ambition, passion, and set of values. Mm-hmm. That's what I just saw in Anthony, a kinship in values, and also the fact that he was ready to entrust me with a whole lot of things. And I was 26 years old, was just amazing. And here we are 3 years later. We have a winery built. We have a new brand that we're excited to put out. New labels. Just the winery is at the Vineyards, and it's amazing. So 3 years later, it's been a 3-year process. When he hired me 3 years later, the how do you say, the top order, or the first thing,
priority.
The priority, yeah. There's just the big thing was we're going to build a winery, and right away we started interviewing architects and ended up agreeing with Larry Ferrar, who did Lingua Franca, Lemmelson, many wineries, Alexana, Adelsheim, and Ilahi. I'm forgetting several wineries. Appassionata for Jay Christopher. Anyway, agree with Larry, and then a year later, in summer 2018, 2 years ago, we started excavating right here. And summer 2020, the winery is done, and first harvest, finally. So it's been 3 years of looking forward to something a lot, because first vintage for me 2017 with Anthony, and following 2018, the Pinots were made at Ken Wright Cellars, and so I got to meet Ken and take over the winemaking, but in his facility. So you're cooking in someone else's kitchen. It's really what it is. And at the same time, I had told Anthony I would like to make Chardonnay. So you don't make any Chardonnay, and you should. So there's, Chardonnay, something I learned, I guess, coming here, goes in and out of fashion. We're getting rained on. We're getting rained on.
In July.
Yeah, in July. Yeah.
Whatever.
It's going to be interesting vintage. What was I saying? Yes, Chardonnay. Like, I guess every varietal around here seems to be going in and out of fashion because the market is such a something that people tend to be sensitive to. But trend or not trends, I was, for me, Pinot and Chardonnay had. It's not for me. They just have a kinship. It's hard to. They make sense together. They just do. And I was making Chardonnay at 00 alongside Pinot Noir at the time, and was very happy with the results. And I really wanted to keep the momentum in my learning curve and keep practicing making Chardonnay. And so 2017 first vintage for me with Anthony, we started making Chardonnay at Lingua Franca. So I called my friend Thomas, and we were doing Custom Crush in 2016. I said, hey Thomas, new job, can we make Chardonnay at your winery? I said, yeah, no problem. So since I guess I like driving during harvest, I would spend the mornings at Ken's in Carlton and drive afternoon and evenings to Lingua Franca to press some Chardonnay. That was every day during harvest for 2017 and 2018. Last year, 2019, because the contract at Ken Wright Cellars was expiring, we moved all the production from Ken Wright to Lingua Franca for one vintage. And now that the winery is done, we moved everything from Lingua Franca back to Carlton, less than a year later. Yeah. But 2019 was fun making both Pinot and Chard at Lingua Franca with all my good friends there, who I think you've interviewed, Thomas, Seth, Andrew. Yeah.
It's definitely been at Lingua Franca quite a bit. That's that's a lot of bootstrapped vintages there between multiple sites and multiple cooks in the kitchen and all of that. I'm curious, what are you most looking forward to with the new facility?
Well, at the same time, you learn a lot by seeing a lot of people. Like, I know, again, back to my 2016 vintage 00, I was working in basically four facilities, and I just learned so much. Tasting, we would source fruit from, 2 dozen vineyards. Just learning so much so fast, doing so many different things within a few days all the time. And so that's great. And then Lingua Franca, the same thing. Or Ken Wright, just different kitchens, different way to cook, trying to make it work in both places, and making it work in both places. And just talking with Ken is always interesting, and there's always something to learn, of course. Talking with Thomas, Seth, Andrew, my friends, and Nico Franca, of course, we're always kind of working off each other and tasting wine together, and we're friends, and so we're always learning something. But yeah, it's going to be nice to me to be in the place that I've helped design, and the work tool. This is really, it's a work tool. It's really a tool to try to do things the way I envision doing them. So I'm amazingly excited, for sure. Amazingly excited to. It's not just also working in our own space and making, because of it's not just the practical aspect. I mean, that's gigantic. I mean, every piece of equipment is something I've chosen and that I've selected by either using or thinking and talking with people, and just this has been a long process. The design, every position of every utilities and so on, every hose bib and so on, everything has been thought through. Also, although we've definitely missed out on some things, I'm sure, and we'll see that during harvest. It'll surface. I'm like, oh God, I wish this thing was there. For sure, no question. But it's not just the practical aspects, it's also the opportunity to create our own culture and to do things with, in a way, with an intention, with a sensibility that would not be possible in someone else's place, just because it's in that place, those places are imbued with their sensibility. And every little detail has to do with that, has to do with how they see things and how they imagine things and what they like and what they don't like and so on. So it's just about the culture, and the team we've built here is just amazing. Christine Marchesi is our, I'll say GM, I don't remember what her official title is, but she's our boss. Heath Payne is our viticulturist who started with us this spring. David Martinez is our assistant winemaker who started with us a year ago now. Hopefully it doesn't rain too hard for the cameras.
It's all good.
It shouldn't rain too hard. It doesn't look like it will. Anyway. Just the team, the culture. We all get along so well, and it's.
Use my jacket if you need to.
No, just the like-minded people as working together, the team, and kind of being able to create I said it a few times already, the culture.
So I'm curious. I want to back up for a second. I'm curious about your crazy year in 2016, making all those wines, all those different facilities.
Yeah.
How do you, when you're making wine for someone else, and someone else, and you're bringing your own sensibilities and your own desires to what the wine is going to be into someone else, working with other people?
Yeah.
How do you kind of find that balance between what you want to do and what you're asked to do, or what you have to do because of the situation you're in?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I assume you have your own winemaking sensibility, your own winemaking philosophy,
yep, for sure.
But you're working with a lot of other people who have their own also. So how do you balance the idea of what you want to do with every wine versus what maybe other people who are in your boss or your coworkers want you to do with it? How do you kind of find the style and keep it unique to each place?
Sure. So in that case, so on the more practical standpoint, so I get that out of the way. The Custom Crush wineries that were helping me make Alite, I would just give them directives and so on. So there wasn't disruption there in terms of message being carried out, and those people were all amazing at doing exactly what needed to be done. So that there was no question there. Now, in terms of the team and say the bosses, there was a very powerful creative mind there, Mark Tarloff, who had very specific ideas about how things, well, not specific, not technical ideas, but how the wines should be interpreted, should be seen as. And so Alite had to be a strong whole cluster portion into Alite. That was just a part of what those wines were going to be. And that was just fine with me, of course, and that's right up my alley. But that's definitely something that was a direction that was given by Mark. then whether it's 20, 30, or 50% is what was up to me, of course. But that was definitely a thing. It had to be native yeast, which is also the most natural way to work for me. So that's those things that worked with me very naturally. There was no problem there. So yeah, that was definitely a style direction. And then on 00, we had to make Pinots in amphoras. We had to snip the berries. So yeah, the Pinots I was working in the footsteps of my predecessors, mainly what was started by Mikey Etzel. For the Chards, it was a blank slate. There was one vintage before me, but there was really no direction. There was no big idea. So then there was a blank slate into making distinctive Chardonnays for 00 in 2016. Yeah. So that was, there was no, you have to do it like this or anything. Yeah. I know there was definitely style preferences. I mean, but it was never told to me it has to taste like that. And he is, and Anthony, and I guess I'm moving forward again, but and then he is just, Anthony will not tell me how to make the wine, which is and thank you, Anthony, for just letting for interesting of making all those wines, and I'll do my best, I swear.
So now that you have that kind of freedom, tell me what your wines are going to be. What is Abbott Claim wine going to be?
The place will tell. I mean, it's not up to me to decide those things. It's not really up to me. It's up to the vineyard. So it's Abbott Claim, Yamel Carlton. We're on the Savannah Ridge here. The Savannah Ridge is this little ridge that runs west-east, on which you'll find Sodas, Mineral Springs, us, Bonnie Jean, a handful of other vineyards there. Dominion 4 is on the north side of the Savannah Ridge. It's just our properties are touching up on top of the hill. They get the north side, we get the south side. So, it's this site. It's the Savannah Ridge. You get up to 500 feet up there. You're 200 feet down here. 250. Sedimentary, very shallow sedimentary soils. So a lot of that old sandstone. So very poor soils. Very poor soils. They don't hold any water. They don't build humus. They don't build organic matter. They don't hold nutrients. So they're tough on the vines. So it's all about the vineyard. It's all about having vines that are happy, that live in balance, that are able to be self-sustenance. I'm not sure that was
self-sustaining.
Self-sustaining. I wasn't sure that was proper English, but that's and so a lot of the work has to be done here, basically, in the vineyard. There's no question about it. And then in the winery, the goal is to understand the character of the place and make sure makes it in the barrel in an undisturbed manner, in a balanced, beautiful, qualitative manner, but also an undisturbed manner, in a way that speaks of the place, that tastes like this place, because the vineyard is the most fundamental thing there is to this whole process. And people can say whatever they want, but I can have all the cool ideas and all the most amazing tricks and all the great experience and whatever, but I could be replaced tomorrow by someone else. And what's left is the vineyard, is the vines. So that's where the deep story is. That's where the meaning of it is. It's an agricultural product. It's not the product of your ego. So yeah, whether I'm making the wine, whether someone else is making the wine, I hope whoever makes the wines from this place just has to be sensitive to what this place has to say, what the vineyard has to say, and humble enough and knowledgeable enough to let it come through in a palatable way, because it has to be the best wine can be. So there's no, and again, I mentioned earlier that my first harvest with the vineyards, I decided to not to destem all the fruit, just because, again, it was just about saying, I don't know this place, I don't understand, and as much as I've done whole cluster for the past 3 years at a time, and I love whole cluster wines, I don't know if I'm going to love whole cluster wines from this vineyard. So I have to understand it. And now there's a bit more stems going back into the process and so on as we understand the vineyard. But I'm really glad. I'm glad that's how I went about it. Yeah, it's all about being humble and thoughtful and mindful of anything that can happen. It's really everyone can have the knowledge. The knowledge travels, it gets shared, it's published. It's what you do with it. And I think what I want to do with it is understand what happens, why it happens, and be comfortable with the wine doing anything within boundaries. I have to set myself boundaries at one point with there's maybe something I'm not too comfortable with, like too much Brettanomyces, too much volatile acidity, rustic tannins, overly oxidized wine, overly reduced wine. Those things are my boundaries, and I know, and my job is to know exactly what could take the wine there. But within those boundaries, we also have to be thoughtful enough to just let it do what it wants to do. So it's all about letting this place transpire. So no native yeasts, no inoculation whatsoever. Partial whole cluster, depending on the vintage. We're doing more and more stems, working with more and more whole cluster now. But it has to be thoughtful. It has to be intentional. Very delicate fermentations, very delicate extraction, very delicate pressing, aging, and oak barrels with this. All of this is just, 35% new oak, 40% new oak sometimes, it really depends. A lot of lees in aging, I'm talking about the Pinot Noir here. And wines that are fresh, that are balanced, that are pretty, that are complex, and that most of all just say something about the place, not about me. Because again, I could maybe next year I'm not here anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'll just get fired, or maybe I just break a leg or something. I don't know. So I don't matter too much. And it's to me this resonates so much more than someone who tells me I'm the best blender, or I'm the best. I don't know, what can people be the best at? I'm the smartest. I use the best yeasts because they're selected yeast from Burgundy, so that's amazing, like great. Or I use the best barrels, wonderful. So your wine tastes like the best barrel. I could do that too, I guess. I could buy the same barrels, could make the same wine. Everything needs to be thought about. Everything is around the fruit and letting the fruit show what it has to show. So as little disturbance as possible from my end, just hopefully a thoughtful guidance. And same thing in the vineyard, that's how Heath works as well. There's a place here, so we have to understand it as a system, and we just have to do things to allow the vines to live their own life, their own balanced, harmonious life within that system. And the system is, for it to be balanced, it has to be complex. So encouraging that complexity, that diversity, those complications, that chaos in some ways, and understanding that that's where balance comes from, because balance doesn't mean still. When you reach balance, it doesn't stop moving. There's always movements. It's just it has to be a movement that's always around a balance point. There's always movements everywhere. Balance is not still. If it's still, it's dead. It needs to be alive. So it's all about understanding the place and the vines and the soil and the terroir and the Savannah Ridge and just this little place, and making sure it's happy and it's balanced and it doesn't get diseased, or doesn't get too hot, or it doesn't get too cold, or it doesn't get this and that. It's being thoughtful about the whole process and making sure it gets gently. We make sure it just stays in its most natural, harmonious direction and place of balance. and that's the idea is that will yield the best those wines can yield in a very transparent and genuine and authentic and undisturbed way. And the winemaking is the exact same thing. It's just a direct continuation of that thing, of that thought. Mm-hmm. So there's no, I don't envision the style of the wine. Thank God. That would be very pretentious.
So tell me about the vineyard as you've come to know it so far, and tell me about the kind of process of learning your site and how long it takes and what you're looking for on a site like this.
We're still doing it. When I arrived, the site was and still is live certified. But there was in live you can have one early spray of herbicide, which is the first thing I did when I started was to stop herbicide spray. So that was the very first thing. So then we became people like Live Plus, Live Organic or whatever. It's just no spray for weeds. That's kind of like a baseline at this point. It should be. And now since last year we're farming organically, and we're in the process of getting certified for organic, which is really a baseline. I mean, there's nothing especially thoughtful about organic viticulture, at least. I'll keep it to viticulture, because you're pretty limited in what you can spray to fight pests, to fight disease, cryptogamic disease, fungi disease. So there's not, it's easy, especially in Oregon, usually dry and warm summers, right? As I'm wiping water off the mic. But usually, they're usually dry and warm summers really lends itself to, it's not the most difficult region to farm vines in. There's barely any downy mildew in Oregon. Really barely. There's virtually no downy mildew in Oregon. Only powdery mildew. So organic, we think of organic as a baseline, and we don't even think about it too much. That's a given, and that's behind us now. We have to go way beyond that. There's no label on how this place is going to be farmed. There's definitely elements that have to do with biodynamics. We're going to be starting out. Now we have the winery here, we can start our own compost. So the grapes come into the winery and they go back into the vineyard. Mm-hmm. What's left of the grapes, at least. Hopefully we're looking at partnerships with local growers to get some different things. I don't want to impede Heath's work, but hopefully we can keep bringing diversity into the place and help us with our compost program. There will be some elements of biodynamics, some elements of a very buzzword now, regenerative agriculture, definitely. But those things don't need labels. It's all about just doing what makes sense. We have places where we have almost no topsoil. We have to rebuild soil. That's all. It happens that, those are the things that are central to what today is called regenerative agriculture. Soil life is also a pillar of biodynamics. But it doesn't matter that it is. We just have to build soil because those vines need life. They need life around them. The soil needs life. That's just what we have to do. So we're in the process of on the steepest parts of the vineyard where the sandstone is especially shallow, we're in the process of rebuilding soil there. On top of the vineyards where the structure of the soil is much better. We're not tilling. So there's a whole piece of the vineyard that has never been tilled since it was planted, since 2003. No cultivation since 2003, since the vines were planted. On the east side, there's some blocks that have been cultivated every other row, so we haven't been cultivated since I started in 2017. That's also the first thing I did with taking the weed spray out, was to stop cultivation on those upper rows, on those upper blocks, the older blocks. And then, it's endless. You should interview Heath. We just have so much. We have so much going on. We're doing, trials. What I've been also pushing for since I started was less hedging. This year will be trials of not hedging at all in a couple of blocks. We also need to do leaf pulling. So the common wisdom here is leaf on the east side, not on the west side. which is fine. But maybe no leaf pulling at all, maybe very light, maybe very late, we're gonna see. But we really want to dial that down quite a bit. And many things. I'm sorry, what was your question?
I'm curious about getting to know the site.
Yeah, but it's forever. We don't get to a point where, oh, good, I've got it all. Close the book. Next. No. Endless. It's endless. We're learning the site right now. It's a warm, dry site. It's all dry farm, and it's a dry site. The soil doesn't hold water, and it's a warm spot. It tends to ripen earlier, and because we want wines that are long-lived, that are fresh, and that are delicious to drink, but also that are resistant to deviations without us having to add too much sulfur or filter too hard or filter at all, because those things strip the wine, they disturb the wine and disturb the expression the transparent expression I was talking about. We don't want that. We want a seamless expression of the place into the finished product. We want the finished product to tell that story. So if you're doing those violent things like adding too much sulfur, like filtering too hard and so on, or having to fine too hard, you're disturbing that expression. So, because we want wine to not be a natural playground for such and such deviations, it needs to have good natural acidity. It needs to have a strong pH. So, again, this is an early ripening vineyard, and we want good natural acidities. So you got to pick earlier, and you have to learn when you have vineyards that accumulates sugar very fast. You have to learn how to deal with grapes that have a lot of sugar that you've picked early. You have to learn how you build the wine, and it's a different way to work than, say, picking at I'm not going to use bricks, picking at 1095 density, 1097 density. It's a different, aiming at potentially getting 13.5, 14% alcohol and beyond. You're just structuring wines completely differently. You're making it, it's different. So, yeah, it has to. We're still learning the site. We're just learning every year. We're gonna actually learn a lot this year, just because being in our own place, being able to have 100% control on everything we do. Not this does or the grapes do, but at least we have control on what we do. When you're in someone else's place, you don't always have control about what you do, when you do it, how you do it, and so on, right? And what you do it with. But here, at least, we have control about how we do things. And so we're going to learn a whole lot more, because we're basically going to be able to be taken. I mean, the logistic part of it is going to be able to be taken out of the equation, and we're going to have a more transparent process. So we're going to learn a whole lot, and we're doing those trials with light or no leafing, tying instead of hedging, that we're going to be fermenting separately and so on. So we'll be able to learn more. And all of that, actually, those trials that I just mentioned have to do with what I was just hinting at, was that those trials is a way to, how do we work with such an early ripener site, trying to preserve acidity, have ripe tannins, because tannins are so important, especially in Pinot Noir, where the ripeness of those tannins is so delicate. And so how do we make all that work together? And there's no making 14% Pinot. There's none of that. Because two things. One, 14%, I mean, I shouldn't exaggerate, but overripe red grape tastes like overripe red grape. That's a general statement, but you get to a place where things start to taste like each other. There's less opportunity for differentiation, and beyond all the whole chemistry of ripening and the problems with that thinking. aromatic ripeness is not a thing. Does not exist for Pinot Noir because it's not an aromatic varietal. So it's that simple. It exists for Gewürztraminer if you want, or Muscat, Sauvignon Blanc. It does not exist for Pinot Noir because the varietal character of Pinot Noir is completely different from its secondary fermentation aromatics and its tertiary aging aromatics. But what I was going to was there's no making those wines. There's no making 14 and plus overripe wines and picking overripe grapes just because it doesn't taste like the place anymore. It doesn't taste like what's fundamental to this whole process. And if you don't talk about what's fundamental about this whole process, then you're just talking about something that anyone can take from you and reproduce and replicate. Mm-hmm. If you make a wine that tells the story of this place, no one else can make that wine. It becomes something truly unique and something worth be interested in, I think. Mm-hmm. I guess that's an opinion. I suppose it is an opinion. It's only an opinion. And finally, we don't make those wines because we need natural acidity to make wines that are stable and that we don't have to beat up with sulfur or sterol filter every year and so on and so on. So on. So we're making wines that are transparent.
So what has changed in the Oregon wine industry since you've been a part of it, and what does it look like now maybe versus what it did when you started?
Oh God, I have no idea.
Been too busy making wine at a bunch of different places.
Yeah, and I'm not, it's maybe not great, but I'm not the most active. I'm not the loudest personality in the wine industry, so. And I like it that way. So I guess I'm maybe a symptom of, there've been changes and I'm maybe a symptom of it. More young people, more international people, more people who are rightfully so looking back to the old world for inspiration. And there's nothing wrong about doing that. There is really nothing wrong about looking back to Burgundy for inspiration, for example. And it's very, very simple. It always has to make sense on a simple level. This saying that this is Oregon, it's not Burgundy, is not good enough of a reason to still not go look and back at the place that gave birth to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Gave birth to all the clones that people are planting here over acres and acres. Pinot Noir became differentiated itself from Vitis vinifera, from general undifferentiated red grape, mutated into Pinot Noir in Burgundy because of the very specific climatic, geologic, landscape, people's way to work the land. All of those things ended up tipping the balance towards a genotype and a phenotype that we ended up calling Pinot Noir. So if we want to if we're planting ridiculous amount of Pinot Noirs and making amazing, mind-blowing amounts of Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley, it's only natural to, if we want to be thoughtful and to understand what Pinot Noir is and what it naturally desires as a plant, it's only natural to go back to where it was planted.
That's all good. Our mics are pretty localized.
I think that's our hedger. So this is obviously not the non-hedging trial. So we're doing that up the hill. Yeah. We're hedging down there.
So it makes sense. So what do you see that trend continuing in terms of?
I have no idea. I'm not the one to make pronostics or prognostications. Okay. I'm not the one to make assumptions about the future, but
maybe what you hope the future will look like here in Oregon.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's happening for the past 20 years. I think some of the most successful wineries that have come out of Oregon have definitely had an open mind about how how to work a vineyard, how to make wine, and a lot of people are tasting wines from all over the world and gathering inspiration from that. And I was only talking about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but it's great to see that there's more diversity than that in the Willamette Valley, and that all the people who are planting those other varietals and making those wines, that stems from that open mind and that desire for something different, and it's all very healthy. It's a great energy. So what I've seen change is that direction of going back to something a bit more simple and a bit more classic and less recipe based, because those wines in the late 20th century, it was quite a process in the US, I mean, and that had an impact in France and all over the world, because the US markets had that impact and the US publications had that impact. But those wines were quite a process, because there was a lot of technology, and it's not just in the winery, it was also in the vineyards. I mean, that's when clones booms is in the 70s and 80s, and control. People love control, especially. It's one of the part of the cultural changes I've learned, as to answer your past questions about what I've learned about the Oregon way or the American way. That's more than American way. It's just control. People love control, and so in the vineyards, there's many ways that control is expressed. Blanket planting of single clones is one. Commercial yeasts, late ripening, still filtration, and so on and so on and so on. All those things about control and being able to replicate the results, to replicate an expected result. And as I was saying earlier, you have to be thoughtful, and you have to have boundaries beyond what the wine doesn't taste like itself anymore. It doesn't taste like the place anymore. Too much Viet doesn't taste like the place. Too much Brettanomyces doesn't taste like the place, and so on. But you have to be comfortable by letting it express itself, letting the praise express itself into the grapes, and the grapes express that information into wine. So we have to let it be, definitely to some extent. It's very important. Or there's no discussion about terroir. There's no conversation about terroir to be had if we're disturbing that expression. So that there's definitely been an evolution. I'm just a symptom of that. I'm just a guy who's not quite 30 years old yet, who just showed up from France, and with this type of sensibility. And I'm happy to see that there's more and more wineries, the successful ones in Oregon, who are that. I mean, there's just many names that come to mind, but I mean, it's just so easy. Walter Scott, Bergstrom, Lingua Franca, Bethel Heights being a pioneer, but at the same time, under the leadership of Ben, is just also embracing that all that thoughtfulness. Christum, same thing. All the winery, all things equal, I mean, all things put in perspective. But at this scale, all the winery, established winery with Steve, but also just always so thoughtful and so sensible to what doesn't happen just there, but also trying to do better. Same thing, Beaufrère, same generation, and Mikey is taking it where it needs to go. And I'm forgetting so many wineries, but yeah, I mean, what if you've met Seth Morgan Long? I mean, he's a symptom too. He's not just. I guess I'm more of a symptom because I'm more of an outsider, but he's an Oregonian, and just so those people are the change, and that's impacting, because at the same time, what really drives this whole thing is, I mean, a big driver, not what it drives it all, but a big driver ends up being those dollar bills, and because the market is receptive and the press is receptive, and those things are being talked about, they're being talked about under positive light. That's what really makes a difference, is that, these guys I've just mentioned could have made the same wines 30 years ago, wrong place, wrong time. But right now, there's just this whole dynamic where you have people who are consumers are liking different wines. They're educating themselves, and they've gone from wines of one style to wines of another style. And it happens to be that you have all those thoughtful people here. And I think this. I really, maybe I'm biased, but I don't think this is an opinion. I think this is objective. I think this is an objective. I think this is closer to a fact than an opinion. Is that it is more complicated, and it asks for more thoughtfulness to make wine this way. It does. Learning to say I don't know, learning to say let it go is very complicated, and it has to come with a high level of technical understanding. It's not just I'm going to wing it. Although some people do, which, why not? And people also respond to that. So yeah. But yeah, I humbly think that it is also, I think it is the most well, it is the way of working I align with. That's obviously the ideas I brought forward. I also think it asks for more of your attention. I was just telling David, our assistant winemaker, last week or earlier this week, maybe about my relationship with things like biodynamics, for example, and again, labels and recipes. I mean, there's biodynamics there's it's been written down, and there's Rudolf Steiner's Biodynamic that's the book right there. That's Le Cours aux Agriculteurs. And then Mariatin applied it and so on. But if you don't want to go buy the book, because if you have to go buy the book, you need cows on the property. You're not bringing cows from the neighbor. You're not bringing manure from the neighbor. You're not. This is not Steiner's Biodynamics. But the thoughtfulness, the attention, the attention, it just forces you to pay so much more attention, to be so aware and sensitive to your environment, to the vines, to the grapes, to the soil, to the life in the soil, around the vines. It's just the amount of intellectual energy that it's asking of you is high. Although, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe those very technical wines that have been made and so successful, those technical wines, yeah, they ask for a high level of technical knowledge. They ask for a lot of ingenuity into creating the first crossflow filter applicable to wine, and improving those machines, and applying reverse osmosis and machine harvesters and so on. I mean, so much ingenuity. Maybe I'm just full of it. That's just my bias speaking there, because there's so much intelligence. I guess for me it's just a matter of how do you direct it.
You see, you talked about this year being a big learning year for you. Now you're doing your first harvest here on site, so you're going to learn a lot about the site and about the winery. So what are you hoping for this year and beyond? What are you looking forward to for yourself and here at Abbott Claim for the next, say, 5 or 10 years?
I'm really excited. I'm just amazingly excited all over. And because it's a big excitement feeling, it's going to be hard to get into why specifically. But we're learning the vineyard, and it just feels great to feel like we're getting to understand things, and we're starting to feel like we have really good things to try, and I'm really excited to see the results of it. Again, we've been thinking about a lot of different things about how to make the vineyards, but also the areas of the property that are not planted to vines, how to do them better, and how to create a more harmonious, healthy piece of land. There's a word that I've been looking for in English. That's just a common one. I just can't find it. It would have been nice to be appropriate, but anyways, yeah, resilient. That's what I was looking for. So I need a second or two. Yeah, just make it a more harmonious, balanced, and resilient place that can live by. They can just do its own job by itself. We don't always have to add something, or just gotta patch a hole here, gotta put a Band-Aid on it all the time. So that's amazingly important, and we're really seeing the practical directions here. So we're going to start implementing, and Heath coming in was key to that. And then on the winemaking side, which again is direct, is the same process. It's not two processes broken, not just with a split in the middle. It's the exact same process. Just understanding the grapes and understanding what the grapes want, what they want, and being able to provide that. We have concrete tanks and wood tanks, which are going to be really wonderful for fermentation. It's going to be really wonderful for fermentation because of those thermal inertias, so very delicate extractions, especially for native yeast. It's extremely important. You don't want swings. You don't want big deltas of low temp and high temp during cuvaison, because native yeasts don't like drastic temperature changes. Even jacketed stainless steel tank, yes, but still very little insulation. But the wood tanks and concrete tanks have this natural thermal inertia just because of the material, so you end up having those very delicate temperature swings, raising up and down, and so that's makes for happy yeasts, but also more delicate extractions. And then the other exciting part is to be able to finish the aging of the wines, taking them to barrel and then putting them back into those tanks to let them finish maturing. So it's nice to have those materials they're breathing materials, concretes and woods. And the selection of those specific concrete tanks was actually this was a big intention, to just find the right concrete to get the right the right impact on the right impact on the wines. Because those one, again, going back to, this is a dry and warm site, it tends to be very concentrated. So you need gentle ways to integrate tannins. So extract tannins and then mature the wines. And the goal being not too fine. You have to find ways to. Oxygen is the best way to do this, for sure. So a lot of things. I don't know if I've really answered your question. It's just about everything. Yeah, just about everything is exciting. Everything. Yeah, there's just been a lot of things. Just on the Chardonnay side, there've been things I've been wanting to do that can't always get to do when you're in someone else's place.
Sure.
So that's going to happen to this year, and yeah. So yeah, being able to see trials translate into the winery, being able to do different things in the winery with new tanks that we've actually put an order in for over a year and a half ago already now, that are finally here, and we're finally going to put grapes in. Little things in the process, just little things but they have to be delicate things. They can't be. None of it is drastic. There's no drastic changes, and it's always something that is always just trying to delicately steer something in direction. It's maybe just, actually it's not even steering, it's just maybe moving a boundary somewhere just a little bit. It has to be able to do its thing. It's maybe, but yeah, just moving one boundary somewhere else. So yeah.
Do you have a size in mind? Do you have any intention, a size of production? Do you have any intention beyond Pinot and Chardonnay? So for Abbott Claim, since Pinot and Chardonnay is all that is planted here on the property, and because I think our desire with Abbott Claim is a small production and a strong, very focused label. I don't see us veering outside of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Now, Angela Vineyards used to be Angela Estate, but Angela Vineyards now, with the freedom, with the dynamics and the freedom of the label. There's Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. I made a rosé in 2019 at Lingua Franca, Pinot Rosé, which is a topic. And I just found some Syrah from the Gorge AVA, not the Valley, from the Gorge this year, which I'm really excited about, very, very excited about. So we'll do a little bit of Syrah this year as well, and we're always thinking about
something else, doing something else. And Angela really allows for that more dynamic, those are more dynamic wines. So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I grew up in the Rhone Valley. All my family is from the Loire Valley in France, but my parents moved into the Rhone Valley when I was 5 years old. And so those wines were the other wines, apart from the one that really grew, that raised me, the wine pub. And so I'm really happy to be able to make some Syrah this year. And the future holds more wonderful, diverse things for sure. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent. That's all the questions that I have for you today. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Is there anything we didn't cover?
No, that's not. I mean, I don't have any desire to speak about anything specific. I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Covered it. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, hospitality, showing off the new facility, and all your stories and thoughts here. So go ahead and let you off the hook.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,